Ever wonder if you're really over something or someone? You tell yourself you're fine, that you've moved on, that you've let go. But then, why does the past still sneak up on you when you least expect it? Why do you still find yourself thinking about that person or situation, even when you swear you've forgotten them? Inside all of us, there are forces shaping our lives without our awareness. Thoughts you can't control, reactions that feel automatic, emotions you think you've buried, only to have them resurface at the most inconvenient times. Emotional detachment is often seen as a sign of strength, a way of protecting yourself from getting hurt. But if it were truly a sign of strength, why does it still feel like there's something unresolved, something heavy inside you? Why does the past keep reaching for you in moments of silence? Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, spent his life exploring the hidden forces that guide our behavior, much of it beneath our conscious awareness. A former student of Sigmund Freud, Jung expanded on Freud's ideas, arguing that many of our fears, desires, and behaviors aren't fully in our control. He believed that the human psyche isn't just what we're aware of, but also everything we repress, everything we try to forget. And those repressed emotions don't just disappear. They stay with us, lurking in the shadows, influencing our choices. Jung called this the shadow self, the part of us that holds all the emotions, wounds, and truths we refuse to confront. So, while you may think you're emotionally detached, Jung would say that detachment is often just a symptom of something deeper, something hidden within. The illusion of emotional detachment. You might believe you've consciously chosen emotional detachment, that you've decided to shut off your emotions. But what if detachment isn't the absence of emotion? It's the suppression of it. What you think you've let go of hasn't disappeared. It's just been pushed out of sight. But here's the thing. The mind doesn't simply erase pain because you choose to ignore it. Instead, it transforms that pain into avoidance, into distrust, into a habit of pulling away before anyone can get too close. At first, detachment can feel like control. It feels like you're being strong, resilient, even invincible. You tell yourself you've moved on, that you no longer feel the hurt you once did. But in reality, you haven't freed yourself at all. You've simply distanced yourself from your own truth. The past isn't gone. It's still there, living in the way you hesitate before you open up, in how you keep people at arm's length, in how you convince yourself that you don't need anyone, even though deep down, you crave connection more than anything. Then, out of nowhere, the past comes rushing back. A song, a memory, a familiar smell, a moment when, for just a brief instant, the walls you've so carefully built start to crack. If you were truly detached, why would one little reminder unravel you like that? That's because detachment isn't healing. It's just postponing the inevitable. The emotions you've suppressed don't fade away. Instead, they manifest in different ways, like pushing people away because caring feels too dangerous, or avoiding closeness because intimacy requires vulnerability. Jung warned us that what we leave unconscious doesn't just vanish. It controls us, and we end up calling it fate. You may think you've moved on, but what if you've only buried something that still owns you? What if emotional detachment isn't strength, but fear disguised as resilience? The power of the shadow never forgets, and the longer you run from it, the more power it gains over you. Jung's question remains relevant today. How much longer will you allow your shadow to make decisions for you? There's a peculiar kind of silence that follows emotional detachment, a silence that isn't peaceful, but rather empty. It's the kind of silence that makes even the best moments feel muted. You don't hurt the way you used to, but you also don't experience the rush of happiness, the deep connection, or the warmth of being fully present with someone. Life keeps moving, but you feel like you're watching it from a distance, untouched, uninvolved. It wasn't always like this, though. There was a time when emotions felt vivid and experiences had weight. Love and loss weren't just abstract concepts. They were forces that shaped you. Now, everything feels theoretical. Conversations feel rehearsed. Interactions are predictable. And the people around you notice, though they may not say anything. They call you independent, self-sufficient, someone who doesn't get attached easily. But maybe that's not entirely true. Maybe you've just gotten really good at keeping the world at arm's length. The price of detachment. Detachment convinces you that you're in control. It tells you that by shutting yourself off emotionally, you're protecting yourself from disappointment, rejection, and pain. But what it doesn't tell you is the cost of this protection. You don't just avoid suffering, you also avoid everything else. You avoid the depth of connection, the rawness of experience, the joy of being fully seen. The more you distance yourself from others, the more intimacy begins to feel foreign. You start confusing solitude for peace, emotional numbness for wisdom, and the ability to walk away for strength. But ask yourself, is this really strength? Or is it fear wearing a different mask? Avoiding pain is not the same thing as healing. Emotional detachment is like hitting the pause button on your emotions, but the emotions never go away. They sink deeper, and one day, when you least expect it, they resurface in ways you never saw coming. The cost of emotional detachment isn't immediate. It's slow, quiet, almost imperceptible, until one day you look around and realize that you're not just disconnected from others, you're disconnected from yourself. Somewhere along the way, detachment stopped being a reaction and started feeling like a way of life. Emotional detachment may seem like a defense mechanism, but in reality, it's a barrier to true healing. The more you run from your emotions, the more they take hold in ways you can't see. The real journey begins not by suppressing what hurts, but by facing it head-on, by embracing the emotions you've been trying to avoid, and finding the courage to reconnect with both yourself and others. Because in the end, only through vulnerability can you truly find freedom. Detachment is not strength, it's suppression. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a conscious decision, but more of a slow shift, an adaptation to all the disappointments, betrayals, and the times when being vulnerable just felt like a mistake. Over time, you learn to stop expecting, to stop hoping, and eventually to stop feeling so much. You figure out how to pull away before anything could hurt you. And now? Well, now it's just who you are. You've become unshaken, self-sufficient, and seemingly impossible to break. But what if that version of yourself isn't as free as you think? What if the strength you've built is actually just a way of avoiding what's really inside? The mind is a tricky thing. It convinces you that survival is the same as healing, that if you don't feel pain, you must be whole. But Carl Jung would say otherwise. According to him, detachment isn't the absence of emotion, it's the suppression of it. And when you suppress something, it doesn't go away. It lingers. It waits. Jung believed that the unconscious mind is constantly at work, shaping your behaviors, relationships, and even the way you view yourself. The things you avoid confronting don't disappear. They become part of your shadow, the hidden part of your psyche where all the unprocessed emotions, fears, and wounds live. You might think you've let go, but nothing that deeply affects you truly leaves. It just finds new ways to surface. And that's why you keep falling into the same patterns. The same emotional distance in your relationships. The same exhaustion when someone tries to get too close. The same instinct to push people away before they can leave you. You might tell yourself these are just preferences or logical choices, but what if they aren't choices at all? What if these are reflexes deeply ingrained in your unconscious, so automatic you don't even recognize them as defense mechanisms? The shadow self isn't just about the dark parts of you. It's about all the parts you've rejected, the emotions you've denied, and the vulnerabilities you've buried. It's the version of you that once craved closeness, once felt deeply, once trusted freely. But as detachment takes hold, that version of you fades into the unconscious. And in its place, you become someone who avoids rather than connects, who dismisses rather than engages. Someone who convinces themselves that they're better off alone. But here's the kicker. The unconscious doesn't stay hidden forever. No matter how much you push it down, it leaks out in quiet ways. Maybe it's that unexplained loneliness you feel, or the inability to form lasting bonds. Maybe it's the constant sense that something's missing, even if you can't quite put your finger on it. The longer you ignore it, the more it controls you, making choices for you without you even realizing it. Jung warned that until you confront these unconscious patterns, they'll run your life and you'll just call it fate. The hidden cost of emotional numbness. You'll wonder why relationships never seem to work, why love feels exhausting, why nothing ever seems to reach you the way it once did. But the truth is, detachment was never the goal. Wholeness was. So, the real question is, after all this time, will you let yourself find it again? At first, detachment feels like control. It's the ability to walk away without hesitation, to remain unaffected by the messiness of emotions. You've learned to cut ties without looking back, to guard yourself against disappointment, and to never expect too much from anyone. But what if this control is just an illusion? What if the detachment you've mastered isn't keeping you safe, but keeping you trapped? Emotional detachment isn't just a habit. It's a system, a pattern your mind reinforces to prevent pain. And like any system built on fear, it comes with its own traps. The first trap is the false sense of power. You convince yourself that needing nothing makes you invincible. You tell yourself that emotional distance is a form of self-preservation. You think you don't rely on anyone, that you're self-sufficient, that you've transcended the need for deep emotional bonds. But what happens when you don't know how to need anyone at all? When you don't allow yourself to be cared for, supported, or vulnerable? There's a fine line between strength and avoidance. And once you cross it, it's easy to mistake loneliness for freedom. Then there's the cycle of self-sabotage. You tell yourself that people always leave, that love always fades, that deep connections are unreliable. So, to protect yourself, you push people away first. You hold back when you should lean in. You withhold affection when you should express it. You shut down before anyone has a chance to hurt you. In doing so, you create the very outcome you feared. You prove to yourself again and again that closeness isn't worth it. But is it really that love fails you? Or have you spent years ensuring that it never gets close enough to succeed? The longer you stay detached, the harder it becomes to access your emotions. This is the erosion of emotional depth. You don't just avoid pain, you avoid feeling altogether. The high moments don't feel as high. The warmth of connection doesn't feel as fulfilling. There's a hollowness beneath the surface that's difficult to describe, but impossible to ignore. You tell yourself life is steady now, that things are simpler this way. But deep down, something's missing. The things that once excited you don't reach you in the same way, and over time, you forget what it felt like to be truly alive. But here's the biggest trap of all, the inability to recognize what's missing. When you spent so long convincing yourself that you don't need love, that you don't need closeness, you lose sight of what really matters. And once that happens, you've forgotten how to let people in. Emotional detachment may feel like a shield, but it's really just a wall. The more you distance yourself from vulnerability, the more you shut down your ability to experience life fully. So, ask yourself, how long will you stay behind the wall? Because on the other side, there's a whole world waiting for you to reconnect, to feel again, and to live authentically. How avoidance traps you in the past. At first, you tell yourself you don't need connection. You stop seeing the absence of it as a loss and start accepting the emptiness as just the way things are. Over time, you adapt. You function. You convince yourself this is peace. But here's the thing. By the time you realize that something's missing, you've already forgotten how to let it back in. Carl Jung, the great psychologist, warned that repression doesn't free us. It just buries the truth deeper. You can tell yourself you don't care. You can convince yourself you don't need anyone. But if that were really true, why does something still feel incomplete? Why does solitude, at times, feel more like isolation than peace? Emotional detachment was meant to protect you. It was supposed to shield you from the pain of heartbreak, the unpredictability of relationships, and the exhaustion of emotional highs and lows. And in many ways it did. But it also took something else with it, the ability to truly connect, to feel deeply seen and understood. It's easy to tell yourself that you're just someone who prefers solitude, that other people only bring complications. But then, in those rare, fleeting moments, the silence feels heavier than it should. The absence of connection no longer feels like strength. It feels like something slipping further and further away from you. Jung believed that the more we detach from our emotions, the more we create a divide between our conscious and unconscious mind. You may think you've learned to live without connection, but the need for it doesn't disappear, it transforms. Instead of seeking closeness, you distract yourself. You stay busy. You overanalyze. You build a life that's structured, efficient, and controlled. Anything to avoid facing the truth that beneath the surface, loneliness has quietly been growing in the spaces where love and vulnerability used to be. The problem is that emotional detachment rewires how you experience connection. The warmth of a deep conversation, the comfort of emotional safety, the feeling of being truly understood. These things start to feel unfamiliar, almost foreign. And when something feels unfamiliar, it becomes uncomfortable. So you avoid it. You tell yourself you don't need it. You find flaws in people before they can get too close. You keep relationships shallow, safe, and at a distance that feels manageable. But despite all of this, something inside you still longs for more. Here's the truth. Loneliness doesn't only come from being alone. It can also come from feeling disconnected, even when you're surrounded by people. You can have 100 acquaintances and still feel like no one truly knows you. You can be admired, respected, even loved, but if you don't allow yourself to be fully seen, none of it will ever feel real. That's the cost of detachment. It keeps you safe from the pain of loss, but also from the beauty of closeness. It protects you from rejection, but at the cost of deep connection. It ensures you never get hurt, but in doing so, it also ensures you never truly feel at home with another person. So, is it really that you don't need anyone, or have you simply convinced yourself that needing someone is a risk you're no longer willing to take? Breaking free from emotional repression, emotional detachment keeps you safe, but it also keeps you separate. The walls you built to prevent pain have done their job, but now they stand between you and everything that once made life meaningful. The loneliness you once ignored is no longer subtle. Something deep inside you knows that staying detached isn't enough anymore. Survival isn't the same as truly living. But if detachment has been your armor for so long, how do you begin to let it go? Breaking free from emotional detachment doesn't mean forcing yourself to feel everything at once. It doesn't mean tearing down every defense overnight. The mind doesn't work that way. What's been built over years can't be undone in a moment. Healing starts with recognition, the willingness to see what's been hidden, to confront what's been avoided. Carl Jung believed that integrating the shadow was the key to wholeness. That which remains in the dark will always control you. But what is acknowledged, explored, and understood can finally lose its grip. Reconnecting with emotions after detachment is disorienting. It feels unnatural at first, like something inside you is resisting it. Old habits pull you back to distance, reminding you how much easier it is to stay guarded. But here's the important part. The discomfort of vulnerability isn't a sign to retreat. It's a sign that something inside you is waking up again. Small moments of presence, allowing yourself to sit with emotion instead of numbing it, choosing to express rather than suppress. These are the building blocks of what was lost for so long. Detachment has shaped your interactions, making sure nothing gets too deep, too risky. But now, noticing those patterns is the first step toward undoing them. The instinct to withdraw when someone gets too close, the need to shut down when emotions feel overwhelming. These are remnants of a past self who believed distance was the only way to stay safe. Awareness disrupts the cycle. The moment you recognize the urge to detach, you reclaim the ability to choose differently. Healing from detachment isn't about rejecting independence. It's about rediscovering connection without fear. It's about realizing that needing people doesn't make you weak, that vulnerability isn't a threat, and that feeling doesn't mean losing control. It's learning to exist in the space between extremes, not too guarded, but not too exposed. It's about finding the balance between self-preservation and the human need for meaningful connection. So, While detachment may have kept you safe for a time, it's now time to ask yourself, what are you really protecting and at what cost? The walls you've built are keeping you from so much more than just pain. They're keeping you from life. Reclaiming your power. Feel without fear. Imagine being consumed by emotion, but not overwhelmed by it. The goal was never to drown in your feelings, but rather to learn how to let them flow through you without resistance. There's a version of you that existed before detachment took hold, before you started shutting down, before you started distancing yourself from your emotions. This version of you was open, willing to feel without hesitation, to trust without fear, and to love without constantly measuring the risks. That part of you was never erased. It was just buried. And now, for the first time in a long time, you have the chance to rediscover it. The instinct to detach, to protect yourself, has been with you for so long that it feels like second nature. The thought of lowering your guard, of letting yourself feel deeply again, might even seem unfamiliar, maybe even unsettling. After all, detachment once kept you from breaking, right? It kept you safe. But what if emotional strength isn't about shutting down your feelings? What if real strength comes from standing in the storm, not running from it? Sure, there's a kind of strength in holding yourself together, in keeping your emotions at bay so they don't overwhelm you. But true emotional strength isn't built on avoidance. It's built on resilience. Not the kind of resilience that forces you to suffer in silence, but the kind that allows you to experience life fully without the fear of being consumed by it. Strength isn't about blocking out pain. It's about being willing to face it, to feel it, without letting it define you. Somewhere along the way, detachment convinced you that needing nothing was the ultimate freedom, that the safest way to live was to remain untouchable, unaffected, impossible to hurt. But freedom isn't found in isolation. It's found in the ability to connect without fear, to care without losing yourself, to trust without constantly preparing for the worst. Emotional strength isn't about being untouchable. It's about knowing you can be touched and still remain whole. Letting go of detachment doesn't mean becoming vulnerable to everything and anything. It means knowing when it's okay to let yourself feel, when it's okay to care, and when to trust that not every emotion is a threat. It's about understanding that connection isn't weakness. Guarding yourself from pain should never come at the cost of guarding yourself from life. Maybe you're not ready to tear down the walls completely, and that's perfectly okay. Healing isn't about rushing to undo everything all at once. It's about recognizing that there's more to life than just avoiding what hurts. Maybe today, you simply acknowledge that strength isn't about shutting yourself off. Maybe tomorrow, you let yourself feel something without labeling it as dangerous. One step at a time, you'll learn that true emotional strength isn't about not feeling. It's about feeling deeply and knowing that you'll be okay, no matter what comes next. And if any of this resonates with you, if you've seen yourself in these words and felt something shift inside you, I'd love for you to show your support with a super thanks. It's a small way to say this message mattered. Your engagement helps keep these conversations going, helps keep them alive. So, if you found value in what we've talked about today, let me know. Let's continue unraveling these patterns together, because healing isn't something you do alone. It's something we all navigate step by step until the weight no longer feels so heavy. Together, we can reclaim the strength to feel without fear,